Hey there, everybody. Welcome into Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, joined by Reiner Saban, our Big Ten insider. And Reiner, we like to think that people come here to listen to us. A couple people do, at least one or two every show. The bills keep getting paid. My check keeps clearing every couple weeks. So far, so good. However, we have someone coming on, thanks to you, who might make one or two more people want to listen. Is that right?
That's true. We were lucky to bring on Paul Finebaum, the host of Paul Finebaum Show, the eponymous host of that, and on the SEC Network, and college football expert on ESPN. So it's a pretty cool thing that he's decided to join us.
Yeah, on National Signing Day, no less. And so that's what the next 35 or so minutes is going to get into. Michigan, Alabama, Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban, their futures, the pressure of this game, not just their futures, the futures of the program, what Jalen Milroe, J.J. McCarthy, even some Dallas Cowboys talk in the mix. A lot of good stuff. Reiner, what else do people have to look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, just a kind of an overview discussion about both of these programs, where they stand, what as you alluded to, what their future looks like, the intriguing coaching matchup between two of the most high-profile figures in the sport, with Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh. So it's a pretty interesting discussion, and I think a lot of people will look forward to it.
We sure hope so. And of course, we start with the jumping off point. That was the wild ride that was the Michigan football season, a couple of suspensions. You've been there for the whole time, so you all know the story. Without further ado, here's Paul. As promised, here's the man you came to listen to, one of ESPN's top college football experts, the voice and face of the SEC network, Paul Finebaum. Paul, first, thank you so much for joining us. And on National Signing Day of all days, you're always busy, I'm sure, and this probably even busier than most. Reiner must mean that much to you, that you were willing to take some time out of your day and join us.
Well, we took advantage of Reiner when he was in Alabama because on our Nick Saban obviously is not an easy person to get on the show. So every week or two when we'd have Reiner on, we'd start the show off by saying, don't forget, Saban will join us later. And then for 3 hours, everybody thought Nick would be there, and it turned out to be Reiner.
Oh, man. Reiner is normally is like the guy people are coming to see, right? But when you're trying to live up to Nick Saban, that can be a tough task. Reiner, do you remember those Alabama days?
I do. And I've been called out by Nick Saban. I'm on his rant reel several times. I think Paul defended me at one time when I think he called me a young reporter at that time.
Yeah, I never really knew the names, but what I never liked though, and this was something that because there was many years ago, I was that young reporter at the beginning of my career in the front row with Paul Bryant and many other legends, and I just, the thing that Saban bugged me to death about, and still does, is his mistreatment of the media. And that's something that I've always believed in, even when I didn't know people like Reiner personally at the time, but I tried to get to know those guys that covered Nick Saban because there was nothing more difficult. Well, I say there was nothing more difficult. I'd never considered the idea of covering Jim Harbaugh at the time.
Yeah,
I was going to stay quiet. I was going to not make any comments about difficult coaches because I don't know. There's also a basketball coach around here who's not best friends with the media, but those are other stories for other times. And Paul, so much to get into this game, obviously. But before we do, and you're talking about Jim Harbaugh, there was a question if Michigan would even play in a game like this, right? The Wolverines, of course, involved in the sign stealing scandal. Recruiting staffer Connor Stalions fired. Linebacker coach Chris Partridge fired. But perhaps most notably, Jim Harbaugh suspended for those final 3 regular season games, his second 3-game suspension of the year. Paul, I guess the question is, how did you see everything unfold from the outside? And when it was clear that Michigan was going to be playing Alabama in the Rose Bowl, what was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I was pretty excited because as a traditionalist, I'll spare you what you already regurgitated ad nauseum about the importance of the game. But I really, I just think after all this and after all the things you guys have been through, to see Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban on that same sideline at the Rose Bowl is pretty exciting to me. And you do get just tainted after a while. This is the third year in a row for Michigan, so you guys understand what those of us in the SEC go through every year. But this is one of the most intriguing matchups I've ever seen. You just don't know what's on the other side of this game for Nick Saban or for Jim Harbaugh. So I'm glad to see it. I never really thought there would be that moment that Harbaugh wouldn't be in Pasadena or New Orleans or wherever it was. It was an utterly bizarre experience, and you guys covered it on a day-to-day basis. I felt like I was too in many ways because for whatever reason, I was part of that group that ESPN called upon to comment. I think so, maybe for all the wrong reasons, but I was there anyway.
Well, can you just talk a little bit more about that? Just explain to people how that works. People might think that you are just choosing to jump on or whatever. Just very quickly. That was not a planned question.
Well, yeah, some of this goes pretty far back, and you guys, some of you may remember when Jim Harbaugh got to Michigan. I was really a big supporter of it. I thought it was phenomenal. Even around, 2015, 2016, I can't remember what year it was. I described him in somewhat of a complimentary fashion at the time as the Donald Trump of college football. I meant by that is that he has just commanded the stage. This was when Trump was coming down the escalator and, before being elected and all the things that have since happened. And then there was something that happened. I really don't specifically remember what caused Jim Harbaugh to attack me in a tweet, calling me Pete Finebaum, the SEC's water carrier. But then it just became part of folklore, and I got called often by ESPN to comment on Harbaugh, and I was pretty bold. Because I really thought he was a massive underachiever, and we all know that, and you all have lived that. And then the last 3 years kind of bounced around. Usually I was called when he was flirting with the Vikings or some other NFL franchise, or when he blew a big postseason game. But this year was different. In fact, the first time I was called by ESPN, the week it first happened in October, I initially felt like the NCAA was out to get him, as some of you may remember. And it was amazing how some of the friendly Michigan shows called me. Rich Eisen called me, hey, can you be on the show today? That all changed because once I started getting a better look at what I believe to be the facts of the case, I reversed my opinion, and I think you guys know where I've been since, as where most people have been other than Michigan fans.
I guess, how has your opinion, though, of Jim evolved over the years? Especially given this run that they've had, but in light of the cheating scandal that kind of emerged, where do you stand on him at this point?
Well, Rainer, I still think he's a fascinating figure. I'm not sure we've had many people like him in college football. I don't know him very well, and I have had some interactions over the years, and some near misses, which I'll go to into later if you want me to. But I think he's somewhat of a dinosaur in a changing world, and like many, I'll be surprised if he's there whenever Michigan season ends, because I think there's too much baggage built up. But I respect his coaching ability. I certainly respect the fact that he's been able to get to 3 CFPs, doing it the way he's done it, because it's so unconventional and contrary to what, let's say, Georgia or Alabama, the way they do it.
Do you think Michigan can actually move on without him effectively? Do you think that Michigan can imagine a reality without Jim Harbaugh as a coach?
I do. I mean, listen. I vaguely remember Michigan before Jim Harbaugh, and there's been pretty good success over the years. Not as much as I think Michigan fans believe there has been, but that's kind of an old it's part of my greatest hits. I'm going to try to spare you the top 40 version of Paul Finebaum on Jim Harbaugh, because it seems like I've said these things so many times. But I frankly think he would be wise to leave. And I don't know all the circumstances, but I do believe that at least there are some people at the University of Michigan with integrity and who believe that what he has been accused of is probably not. He's not going to be able to get away with. I also have very little faith, if any, in the NCAA, but these two seem to be on a collision course. And what I saw from Tony Petitti a couple of weeks ago was unique, because usually you don't see that from a conference office. Instead, you see the conference office doing everything they can to protect the university, regardless of what the facts are.
It was unprecedented. But before I move on, Paul, play the hits. Play the hits. We brought you all the hits. It's the holiday season. You can play all the hits you want. But in the meantime, you talk about it. You've been impressed with how Jim Harbaugh has been able to get to this level, right? But it has been getting to this level. It has not been getting over that hump. Jim Harbaugh 1-6 in bowl games at Michigan, and 0-2 in college football playoffs. Nick Saban, of course, 6-1 in college football playoffs semis, 6 straight wins. The players and coordinators told us this week that Harbaugh has literally switched up how they're bowl prepping, right? Trying more of a slow ramp. Is it that simple, or what makes Nick Saban such a master of this month?
Well, I think there's a level of organization that Saban has, and Rayner saw this up close, that nobody else has. It's not just his coaching staff. I mean, you walk in. I know Rayner's covered the Cowboys. I mean, you walk into the Alabama football office, and you think you're at the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, there are 9 assistant coaches, and then there's 500, or it seems like that, analysts roaming around. So there's almost nothing left to chance, where I don't know exactly how Harbaugh runs things, but I'm guessing he's a little more old-fashioned in the way he does things, even in this very contemporary modern world. And I just think Saban I'll try to spare you the too many GOAT references, but you get to that level by leaving nothing to chance, by covering every imaginable detail. I once spent about 7 or 8 years ago. I spent a couple of days with Saban for Outside the Lines, and I flew I think to Connecticut and back, and this was in July of, I believe, 2015. He literally, on the way up, watched the Auburn spring football game. Now, what was he looking for? I don't know. But maybe he saw something. Maybe he picked up something that he used later. But that's the kind of coach he is. I don't know too many coaches who do things like that, but he's always looking for new. I mean, he won a national championship in 2015 on an onside kick against Clemson. I mean, his team was done. He rolled the dice. He got it after a touchdown in the game. He turned a tie game into pretty much a 14-point situation in a matter of a couple of plays. But I mean, he's lost games like that too. But probably the thing about Saban is he learns. He lost to Auburn in 2013, that famous kick six game. He's lost a couple other ones. What's happened the last 2 times Alabama's gone to Auburn? They have literally won on miracles. I mean, both games were 99% chance of losing, and he pulled them out. So how do you do that? Is that luck? To a degree, but it's also occasionally making the right call. And I'm not sure I've seen a lot of that from Jim Harbaugh. I mean, he either overpowers you or he loses those big, or used to lose those big games. He hasn't quite lost as many as he has in the past.
Along those lines, I mean, with Saban, has this, in your estimation, been his best coaching job at Alabama, especially given what was going into the year with the direct and existential threat posed by Georgia?
Yeah, I think it has been. And I don't completely buy, Rainer, the narrative that Nick Saban nearly tanked the South Florida game to prove the fans wrong. I'm sure you've heard that from. I mean, that's anyone who's ever been around Nick Saban knows that he's not doing anything for the fans. That's probably way down on his Christmas list. But I just think he brought in a coordinator who was slow to learn and stubborn, and wanted his guy to be the quarterback. And it became very apparent after Texas that Alabama had problems. And did they panic? Yeah. Did Joe and Milroe act like he didn't like the idea of being benched? I'm sure he did. By the way, probably he knew the other quarterbacks couldn't play. We didn't, but he did, because he worked with them every day and he'd already beaten them out. So, but that's the narratives of Alabama football. You either accept what the what the story is, or you have to fight and tilt at windmills the rest of the way. But it's been brilliant. I think some of it is a result of having to really coach again. He had the best offensive player in the country last year and the best defensive player, and the expectations and the joy of it was gone. But a lot of Nick Saban's successes have been joyless. I mean, that's kind of his existence. This year, it looks like he's happier. Now, I think a lot of that has more to do with age than anything. He's 72 years old. I'm 4.5 years behind him. I can understand a little bit as you hit certain benchmarks. You go, you know what? I don't know if I'm coming around this corner again. And I think what concerned him the most was that his grip on college football had been taken away, not by Jim Harbaugh, not by Ryan Day, but by Kirby Smart, his own mentor, the person he's mentored, the person that learned under him, that was somewhat of a son to him in terms of coaching. And I think Saban also knew that if Kirby Smart beat him in Atlanta 3 weeks ago, that train was heading to a national championship, and Nick Saban was essentially spending the rest of his career playing for second in his own league.
Do you think that game and the result of that game could have influenced, his next move, as far as whether he moved on from college football, or, maybe wanted to continue and try to fight this fight? Or do you think that the victory may have changed his whole perspective on what he wants to do going forward in the next 5 to 10 years?
Rainer, I think that's the unanswered question. And a lot of people, I was talking to my wife last night. She said, well, do you think he'll step down if he beats Michigan and wins the CFP? I don't really think that matters, because I think he's already won the most important game of the year for him personally. I promise you, for Nick Saban to beat Jim Harbaugh is not going to be something that he remembers as he retires. It's just not that big a deal. He's beaten bigger and better coaches and more important wins. And after a while, he's won. I'm trying to remember. I think he's won 7 national championships. I mean, can you count them all? Do you even remember them after a while? I'm not saying that. Obviously, Belichick would like to try to remember one of his, but when you've won that many, they're great, but they're not as important as the first one or the second one. But I think for Nick Saban right now, I can't answer the question because this is National Signing Day. And he signed the best quarterback in the country, and he's got the best. So that's the hard part about walking away. Nobody wants to, do all this shopping, so to speak, in this NIL infested world, and say, okay, I'm out of here. And besides, Rainer, you covered him. This is not a man that's going to be happy tomorrow if he retires. I don't care, how big a check he gets from ESPN or from Aflac or or from some corporate board, that's not enough to satisfy Nick Saban.
Yeah, I guess you alluded to the idea that this game was maybe not as important as the Georgia game, but Saban seems to have a particular dislike for Michigan, going back to his days at Michigan State, before that as an assistant at Ohio State. And if you recall in the Citrus Bowl, I mean, he did a rare thing where he punched in a late touchdown with Najee Harris, who was a Michigan recruit in that game. And that was very rare. I had never seen that from him. I mean, he usually just sat on the ball, didn't want to do that because he was playing the long game. He was always thinking of the long game. But there's something about Michigan that seems to kind of rankle him. I mean, have you gotten that same impression from Nick?
I have. But you said he doesn't like Michigan. That would include a lot of us, wouldn't it? I mean, this is not a normal opponent, but I have seen Nick Saban do a few things like that I normally would not have seen. During most of his tenure, he would never score at the end of the game. But I don't know if it's really personal with Harbaugh. I can't answer that. But yeah, when you're the Michigan State coach for 5 years, I would say you spend plenty of time having your face rubbed in the dirt by Michigan folks.
I think he did. But when you talk about, when we look at Saban and this being one of his best coaching jobs, you talked about it, Paul. It was Tommy Rees and Milroe sort of getting on that same page and really starting to click on offense. At least that's what it looked like when from out here when Alabama took off. Michigan's own quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, has his own arc this season, so to speak, right? He was peaking towards the Heisman, just one touchdown in the last 5 years, or in the last not 5 years, feels like 5 years, last 5 games. So which quarterback would you rather have for this game, and why?
Well, I'd rather have Jalen Milroe because I'm a big believer in give me the best athlete, give me the guy who can get out of trouble. And I think Milroe has been that. I mean, I respect McCarthy, please. I don't want everybody to think that there's everything about the University of Michigan. I wake up and go to sleep with hating. I don't. I do think it's a good school. Okay, I've covered a couple of Michigan games in my life, and they've always been pretty special. It's not like seeing a game with Alabama and Iowa. But I just think Milroe has so many intangibles. And with McCarthy, I don't know McCarthy's health right now. I mean, clearly something was wrong the last few weeks of the season, and that affected him. If he's 100% healthy, this is a bigger debate. But I have seen Milroe, and as scary as he can be at times, on the negative, he has blossomed into a pretty amazing player. The idea that he nearly made the Heisman finals is incomprehensible.
Why do you think? I guess regardless of the result, I mean, I assume you think this, but why do you think Alabama is more of a sustainable program at the top, say, than Michigan is?
Well, I just think the Alabama recruiting apparatus is really only rivaled by, I think, two schools in the country, and that would be Georgia and Ohio State. Now, I realize all those great recruits have not exactly proved bountiful for Ryan Day in the last 3 years, but I think ultimately, the history of today's college football will support that type of recruiting, and I think it does. I think it's going to become even more important next year when you get into this playoff, which is going to be there's going to be a lot of attrition, and you're going to need a deep team. And I mean, I think that is what I find so remarkable about Michigan's accomplishments is, they've been able to recruit really good players there, but there's no way they compare with Georgia and Alabama from on this high holy day from a star system. I mean, I'm still not. I mean, you guys cover the team. I'm still not sure how they've been able to pull it off.
It's a lot of development. It's turned into that balance of that development program with developing 4 stars, right? Not a development with 3 stars, but if you get that just higher. And so, Paul, I guess that sort of leads us into, where do you see Michigan's program going over the next 5 years? I mean, is there a program in America that has potentially more of a split path and more options in ways it could go?
I don't think so, because college football now is so unpredictable, and the portal is the reason, and you don't know what's on the other side of the portal. Will you be able to move whenever you want, which seems possible. And that's where players are. I mean, I was reading something this morning that Billy Napier at Florida had to get this quarterback. It was the linchpin to his future. No, it's not, because the guy could be gone in a year. I mean, Alabama has got a couple of 5 stars on the roster right now that aren't going to be around much longer. That's just the way it goes. So I don't think the recruiting card is as critical as it was. I mean, but I also don't think many players are going to be hanging around for development either, like what you folks have seen up close with so many amazing players who we may not have been paying much attention to 3 years ago on signing day, but are leaving and going before you even sit down on the night of the draft. So I think the first move is Harbaugh. What does he do, regardless of the next game or 2? It seems pretty apparent what Michigan will do. I mean, I'm just guessing. You guys talk about it all the time, whether the heir apparent has already been chosen. Seems like it has. And, does the NCAA investigation derail anything, or is it just like every other NCAA investigation, really aimed at one person? And without him, I mean, I've seen a lot of shady characters in my part of the country go through endless NCAA investigations and end up with barely a scratch.
You mentioned the transfer portal and everything. How do you think Saban has handled that, especially over these last couple of years? It diminishes his authority in some ways, because he can, keep those guys, the 5-star kids, on the bench and tell them to wait, showing them that there is a pathway towards the NFL. But now, they have these options to go transfer elsewhere and play immediately. How has he handled that, do you think? Just the reduction in maybe clout that he has over his own players?
Well, I think it drives him crazy. I remember he called me about 2 years ago, right in the middle of, a little less than 2 years ago, in the middle of, the explosion of NIL. And he said to me, so you need to do something about this. And I'm like going, first I didn't want to tell him I was totally in favor of NIL. So I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I said, maybe you ought to say something about it. And he said, well, what should I say? And I didn't realize 2 weeks later he was going to attack Jimbo Fisher. And yes, but I'm not taking credit, but I said, you need to make a very concise statement. Of course, he did not. He accused Jimbo Fisher of being a cheat, and then denied it as soon as Jimbo responded. But that's just the way it is, and Saban can't control that. He's adjusted to the fact that Alabama is still such a machine that it still has done well, and I think will continue to do well. But does he enjoy it? No. That's why I think this season was special. He was able to squeeze so much out of 15 5-stars and a handful of 4-stars. He actually got a 4-star to perform at a 5-star level. But that's not normally the case. And that's one reason why people aren't sure how much more he wants to do. But on the other hand, he's succeeding in it. Every time you think that program is about to fall off the face of the earth, they come back last year with the number one recruiting class, maybe the best recruiting class ever. You hear that every year, by the way. And this year they may be way down at number 2 or 3, depending on how the last thing falls. And he can pick and choose. Who doesn't want to consider going to Alabama? So I think that's all the built-in things that work for him. But I think it's just a matter of how many more. If he pulls this thing off, I think the weight on him to leave with a perfect canvas will be high. But he's had that before. His team on the COVID year. That was one of the most dominant teams of all time. Now you can debate does that championship count as much as this one? It's going to count whether you want it to or not. But he's had. I frankly wondered if he wouldn't walk away after Tua through the 2nd and 26 in overtime to Devontae Smith. Nobody's ever had a better ending than that. But he's only won one title since then, and we started making a big deal this year when it looked like they had been knocked out after Texas that they would now only have one title in the last 5 years, and that would be the longest stretch that he had gone with in such a situation. He's averaging he's been averaging about every 2.3 years a national championship.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's unbelievable. We had that show earlier, right, Reiner? After Texas, after South Florida, the end of Saban show, and we tried to avoid it, right? Even last year when they miss it, and you never want to write Saban off, but
listen, I made the same statements. Only the Alabama fans never. They were bailing out. Everybody was bailing out after that game. And Saban said some just bizarre things. The day after the South Florida game, he announced that Milroe would be the starter. He said he showed such great leadership, and I'm like going as a cheerleader. But the one thing that Raider knows, and you guys can accept, it really doesn't matter what the facts are. Nick Saban is always going to be right.
It seems that way. All right, and with that, is he going to be right for a 7th consecutive college football playoff semifinal on January 1st, Paul? We'll let you go with this one. Number 1, Michigan. Number 4, Alabama. Beyond Jalen Milroe, beyond J.J. McCarthy, I have a guess. I think I know who you think may win, but I will ask you, who wins and why?
Yeah, I do think Alabama will win. And I don't want to just sound like I'm pandering because you guys are good reporters. You can find a million things I've said to counter what I'm about to say, but I do think this Michigan team is outstanding. May not like some of the things and some of the manners, but this is a really great football team that has been the best team all year. But I think in this setting, in this moment, Alabama has superior speed. They have a secondary that is frightening. Their offensive line is so much better than it was. If Michigan had played Alabama second week of the season, Michigan would have won the game pretty handily, but that didn't happen. And I do worry a little bit about Michigan being tested. I'm struggling to find many games that I would count as legitimate contests, 2 or 3 at the most, where Alabama has been tested by everyone and has faced the crucible. And I think a lot of times in these games, there's that moment when something happens, whether it's a penalty, whether it's a 3rd down, whether it's a 4th down, whether it's reacting to a bad an interception or whatever. And Alabama, I can go through Alabama's schedule quickly and give you 7 or 8 moments when Alabama could have lost. They did lose to Texas. They had the anxious moment against South Florida. Ole Miss should have beaten them. That's unequivocal. Ole Miss looked better that day, but Lane Kiffin got in his own way. Tennessee had a great shot at beating Alabama. They had a big first half lead. Texas A&M on the road had Alabama down, but Jimbo Fisher, threw up all over himself, as he has been known to do. And then down the stretch, the games are self-explanatory. LSU with Jaden Daniels, blinked at the moment that they had to win, and obviously Auburn speaks for itself, and Georgia. So that's a lot of games that Alabama has been tested in. I think that to me, not X's and O's, but intangibles is really what carries Alabama to the win.
All right. Well, are you going to be there, Paul? I don't know. Do you go to?
I sure will.
Great. Well, maybe we'll see one another up in the press box, and
I hope so.
Reiner will show us around. Reiner's also a big star in LA. Pretty much anywhere he goes, so he can show for us around.
I think
you probably had your own motor.
No, Reiner, will you be wearing the predictable shades when at media days?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, whole get up, everything. Yeah,
okay,
no, I definitely want to. I'm actually looking forward. This is the last major bowl I haven't covered. So, and this is the one I've always wanted to cover the most.
I've been there a few times. It does live up to it. There's some places that do not in college football, but the Rose Bowl is you will have a good time there. I'll see. I'll be there at media days. So I think we're doing a show that morning. So
okay,
come on by.
Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely.
We will see you there, and everybody knows where to find Paul, the Paul Finebaum Show on the SEC Network. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
The pleasure's been mine. Thank you, guys.
Thanks again to the one and only Paul Finebaum for joining the show. And as always, thanks to Editor-in-Chief Nicole Avery-Nichols, Executive Editor Anjanette Delgado, Sports Editor Kirkland Crawford, Audio Engineer Robin Chan, Sports Editor and Show Producer Andrew Burkle, and of course my boy Reiner. For all of them, I'm Tony. Talk to you next time.